So welcome everybody. My name is Leonie Smith, and um I'm a member with Sociocracy for All. I'm also part of the group that's organizing this webinar. I'll introduce my two other um, activators for this webinar, and I'm also the lead for the NGO Circle for Sociocracy for All. And I'm based in Vancouver, Canada. And joining today is the two other members of our team, Renee. Renee, would you like to do a brief introduction? And then we'll hear from Joe.
Sure. My name's Renee Rahutsky. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister who works for our national organization, and I'm working on introducing sociocracy to Unitarian Universalist faith communities. And we have Joe.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Joe. I'm a Belgian living in Ecuador. I work in the development cooperation sector, and I'm an active member of SOPRA, the Spanish-speaking part of SOPA. I'm very happy to be on this team. Okay, so this is the first one of a series of lunch and learn sessions. Today, we decided to do it on how to bring back the joy to your organization. And we are going to start off with a video where three incredible persons tell us about how a switch to sociocracy or how the use of some sociocratic tools has helped their organizations to reconnect to their purpose and joy. So we're going to have Nakachi talking about the Embodiment Project. That's a nonprofit arts organization, and she will tell us all about the transformative power of art. Then we have Teal Short from Jesus People, like a Christian hippies organization. He was part of the mid-management of this organization and helped to make the switch to sociocracy. And finally, we will have Jane Preston Rose from the Kent League of Women Voters, and is a longtime member there and will talk about her experience with sociocratic meetings. This is a 23-minute video that Renee will show us right away.
Kati is with Embodiment Project, which is an organization based in San Francisco. So welcome to Kati. Maybe you can let us know who Embodiment Project is.
Yeah, Embodiment Project is a tiny and mighty nonprofit arts organization. As you mentioned, we're based in the San Francisco Bay Area. More specifically, we're a dance company organized and focused on Black social dance, particularly hip hop, whacking, locking, breaking, house, and bringing these Black innovative traditions and artistic expressions to the concert stage. All of that being toward the goal of collective liberation and collective healing. So the topics that we deal with and present art about are everything from racial violence to childhood sexual abuse to gender violence, and just how through all of these things we can transmute them and by addressing them bring about healing and liberation.
Right, the transformative power of art, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. What drew you to sociocracy?
Yeah, Embodiment Project began its journey towards sociocracy a little bit before I came on. My understanding is really that when the world shut down in 2020, it also shut down much of the work that was available, especially for a performance company that couldn't perform. It was in that cocoon of reckoning, of thinking about what does it really take to survive and what does it really take to be organizationally sustainable. That sociocracy came as a way to recreate the organization from the inside out and to bring the values that had always been there actually to bear in how the organization is run and how it functions. And then from there, to think about, okay, now how do we rebuild as performances and things are coming around again and the world is opening up again? Like, now how do we make sure that we are walking the walk, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
It's always been a very small organization. It was founder-led primarily. Ho Clay Moon, the founder, and my co-executive director, founded the organization going on 17 years ago. She pretty much had to do everything. And she's also the choreographer and the artistic director. And it was really, I would say, hierarchical of like there just being one person at the top and everyone else kind of having to support or do pieces of the work. And honestly, I would say rather than that top down, I would see it more as a wheel with a center. And then there were just the, a few spokes coming out. She's the one who had to hold it all together.
So I'm curious then if there's any examples or stories that you could share about a moment when maybe you yourself experienced joy or like deeper connection to the purpose because of this newer way of working.
Maybe if I didn't love facilitating and love being in crunchy situations, it might not be seen as joyful. It is really joyful for me when we are in a circle and folks aren't waiting for the round, jumping in, and I get the opportunity to kind of nudge and bring us back to that value, bring us back to the why. It's not just a structure, but it's also that everyone has a security in knowing that they have a space, that they have a voice, and that they have the agency to choose to pass or to speak. I have really enjoyed seeing the journey of having to do that a lot and reminding and folks gradually getting it, and then folks holding it and then reminding each other or repeating it themselves, and they're like, oh, I didn't mean to jump in. I know that this is really important, or hearing that expressed and just seeing it integrate. I think what has been really joyful for me is having that day-to-day experience of seeing it go from something that's resisted or challenging, even though it might be accepted, but still challenging. The discomfort of being corrected or being nudged back towards the goal or towards the structure, and then seeing it be integrated. Right. Then just seeing the beauty of that and the value of that and how it transforms our relationships, period. Like outside of a meeting or outside of the organization. I feel like the folks that I work with are also the people I care about and that care about me.
I'm curious about, because you described it as a spoke with the executive, has sociocracy supported her and also you just in your leadership?
Absolutely. We're an interesting case because we went from having a whole lot of circles to just having one now and it being general circle. But it's allowed us to be much more intentional and really have a process before we build out the circles. The way I think it has really supported us is that instead of it being this spoke or this wheel with spokes extending from it, it's more of a constellation. And so even though it's just us in general circle, each of us is holding some piece of this entire constellation, right? And so if you think about astrology or whatever, like it takes all those stars for it to be Gemini or for it to be Orion or whatever. And so without all of our stars there, it's incomplete. There's a shared defining. We're technically a worker-directed nonprofit, while also having executive directors. Depending on, I think, how that's held, it can be contradictory. And so I think the way it's transformed us as leaders is that executive director is just the name of the domain, the name of the work that we do. It is no more powerful or important or valuable than financial steward, than dancer, than marketing support. It's just the name for what we do. It doesn't name our level, if that makes sense.
I'm wondering if there's any other tools that are associated with sociocracy that has helped to kind of like build that collective story. You talked about collective liberation. That I found useful.
Useful and still challenging and still a work in progress. It's objections. And realizing how deeply ingrained and programmed we are to not object or to object when it's more personal
Mhm.
and not with a lens of organization. I am really appreciating Sociocracy for giving us the tools to do that work. We are
Mm.
not there. And we're much closer, right?
Right.
We're much closer than I think just in the couple of years that I've been in the organization. I have seen a greater comfort and more of an integration and willingness both to
Mhm.
object and to receive objection. I give thanks for the folks who have trained me, because that was the scariest part for me in sociocracy training. Was like, I don't think I can handle objections. Being able to see a strong facilitator receive objection and then integrate that into the proposal right there on the spot. When I'm like, but that's not the point. And no, that's the point, is that we all feel like contributors, that everything that comes forward is really for the benefit of the group, that objection is a gift, and that it's only when trust is built, really, that we can see, oh, wait, you do hear me, that then folks tend to be more receptive to, okay, but is it good enough for now and safe enough to try? Like they can have more of like a, okay, let me refine that tool, that strategy, that element of Sociocracy. I think is so deep.
Yeah, I'm really hearing how it supports relationship building, which I can imagine is important for an art that's marginalized, made by people who are traditionally marginalized. And so the structures can help to tend to some of those realities.
And I think it also creates a space where folks who are traditionally marginalized, doing and creating work that is traditionally marginalized, also have a space to not be marginalized, but to really be fully empowered to participate.
Right.
In so many of our lives, we don't even have the space to really practice that, and it's just theoretical, or we're making it up. We have to go back to reality. So to have a real place where, no, this is real work, this is a job, this is how we run, and you are not in the margin. You are right here. We're all right here doing this together.
Thank you so much for your time, Nakachi.
My pleasure. Thank you, Leonie. This is
Thank
fun.
you.
Can you present yourself and Jesus People?
Jesus People formed in 1972 by a bunch of kind of young Christian hippies, part of the Jesus movement, Christian subculture of the hippies of like the 60s and 70s. They're one of the few kind of that era to make it through, to their credit. I moved in because I was craving intentional community life, craving to be a part of. I had tried to do community with my kind of transient 20-something friends, but like I wanted to be a part of something that was intergenerational and was more established and solid. And I definitely experienced that there. It was a beautiful, beautiful time learning about community from people who've been doing it for decades. Even though it's an intentional community, it was very much formed unintentionally. They didn't have a lot of thought behind what should our structure be? How should we make decisions as a group? And what are the implications of that going to be decades down the line? When I moved in, they were already 47 years old as an organization. I got there at a very exciting time. The new leadership was questioning the old ways of doing things. And so that's kind of when I entered the scene. Within my second year being there, I was given a position in like the mid management. So I was quickly thrown into the fire. So they had operated with a leadership team for 50 years. Leaders would burn out. So it shrunk down from a team of like 10 people to like 4 people and then 3 people. So it was really the leadership team's idea to make the switch. They were like, we need help to figure out a new system. And that's when we started researching and we found Sociocracy. And they've completely switched over. The leadership team doesn't exist anymore. They have a general circle, they have a mission circle, and over 20 circles that are managing everything. So they did make the jump. First phase of research, there were 21 volunteers, and I was one of those. And we split into 3 groups of 7, and we researched. We were all drawn to the ideas of more voices being heard, more like distribution of power and responsibility, and like more people stepping up. And I think everybody was excited about that idea, both the people who had held power up till then and were burning out, like myself and members of the leadership team, and also people who had felt very stifled, like they didn't have a voice, disempowered for decades, that had, lived there for decades and feel like their voice didn't really ever matter. Part of what sociocracy shone a light on is that we didn't have a very centralized shared purpose. I think we already were aware of that at some level. The leadership team was in the weeds on all the decision making in the community, right? Because we were still in that structure. They should have been the mission circle, and that's what they wanted to be, but they were in charge of everything. So there was no time to actually make any momentum on figuring out what are we even doing here? In the early years, the purpose was vague evangelical, bring the word of Jesus to and then it kind of shifted into well, there's all this homelessness in Chicago. We want to work against homelessness and help those in need. It was also well, we want to live together. That kind of happened organically. The actual communal side of we are living together because what? I don't know. If you asked all the different members that question, they would give you 100 different answers. Everybody has some connection to Jesus or Christianity, but that's a wide range. We were finding that sociocracy could help us find what our vision is. Till we have the spaciousness to actually work on our vision, if we didn't switch structures into something that actually kept the ship afloat. So that was a big draw that we often talked about, is we'll have more time. And some people were we shouldn't do this work until we figure out what our vision is. And there's my argument was we won't be able to figure out what our vision is until we do this work. So it's kind of this back and forth chicken and egg thing. But ultimately that was a big draw for us. The effect of the hierarchy, like all forms of kind of oppression and hierarchy, it's bad for everyone, right? It's not good for the people with the power either. We often think of the people that it disempowers, but dehumanizes the leaders while it disempowers the led. Our team was representative of all those people. I was on the team and I was one of those exhausted leaders who's constantly feeling like I'm alienating all my fellow community members by having this power over their lives. So we were able to humanize each other in that process. I would say I had judgments about people who had taken a back seat in the community and in my eyes weren't carrying their fair share of the load. But it's through that process and those conversations, I'm learning oh, I see why you took a back seat, because you felt you didn't have a voice. And why would you want to contribute to a community that doesn't value your voice? Because I came in and I kind of was given a voice right away as the new guy, but not everybody was given that voice. It helped me rehumanize some of those folks that I had maybe had assumptions about. And I think some of those folks were able to rehumanize me and the leadership team. We definitely talked a lot about how this structure is setting us up against each other. Sociocracy could really lift that burden and allow us to actually be able to like each other and to work well together and to not set us up with this power over dynamic. It's really been hurting us for decades. And I did see some of the fruit of that even in the process before we were actually implemented. So we definitely did try to practice sociocracy in our research group, right? Try to go around the most basic tenets of sociocracy of giving everybody a turn and having an aim that's clear. What I experienced is sometimes there would be one person that might really try to shift the focus of the meeting. I think we need to talk about our Christian framework. How is our faith guiding this process? We need to come up with a faith statement. There was a moment where everybody was kind of that's true. I think in the past, I might have felt I needed to no, that's not what we're doing at this meeting. And then I'm the bad guy for not caring about our Christian faith. But the system kind of corrected itself. Well, what's our aim? I don't even think I had to say it. I think somebody else was able to ask, well, what's our aim in this group right now? And because we actually did come up with an aim and wrote it down, our aim is to research a new decision-making structure for the community. Our aim isn't to come up with a new statement of our faith, a new values statement. So I don't think we can actually do that in the space. That's not what we were tasked to do. And so then the group kind of was oh yeah. And that one person wasn't maybe happy about that, but there wasn't much to be said. It was the group was kind of yeah, that makes sense. We should focus on, and in my head, I was just yes, it's working. Because we've been rudderless so long, it's hard to get work done when you don't have a central vision or an aim, right? Because you can just get thrown off and derailed. And I'd experienced that so often And so it was really amazing to see it work. The system is correcting itself. I don't have to overcompensate as a skilled facilitator in the space. I felt like I often had to overcompensate, and then puts me out on a limb, and it makes it about me in a way that, again, sets me up against my friends. When we all have a voice and everybody's empowered and we have an aim that we all decided together, right? Like, we can go back to that. The structure really protects the relationships in that way, and protects the aim, protects the group and the work that we're doing. And so I watched that happen like in real time in a meeting. There are countless stories like that where I felt like, oh, this is great.
What feeling words would you use to describe that experience?
Relief, is that a feeling? Hope, peace, and like validation, I think, because I think I had been telling myself that maybe I'm not a very good leader. There was some validation in like, oh, I actually am a good leader. Our structure has been setting me up to feel like I'm not. I felt like happy. Oh, I'm still a good person. Like, not even just a good leader. I think I was subconsciously doubting whether I was a good person, whether I had good intentions, because I was in a structure where I had too much power given to me. I was made to believe that that was the right way to do it because I just kind of inherited it. I was just joining this group and this is how they've always done it, but it didn't make me feel good doing the work. And so it was a validating feeling that community is possible, that this dream of mine of living in community is actually still possible and is good for us, and that I'm still a good leader and a good person. Happiness and peace and validation and relief.
There are some beautiful words to end with. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us.
Yeah.
I have with me Jane Preston Rose, who is a longtime member of our local League of Women Voters. I'm excited to have Jane talk about her experience in some meetings that I facilitated where I used some sociocracy principles and practices. Even though we're not a sociocratic organization, we do believe in consensus, and consent are cousins in the decision-making realm of things. One of the practices I did, which feels like it was organic to you, is I made sure I asked everybody like how they were feeling about where we were in the process. So even though it wasn't a vote, it really was that in some ways that's the consent, where if someone had a problem, I tried to make space for them to dissent.
I think the fact to get everybody to speak up is important. You wouldn't let anybody just sit back and not say anything.
Right.
And that's frustrating too, especially if you're not the chair of a meeting, is some people aren't talking, and you don't want to preempt the chair by saying, hey, Sally, why don't you say something? Or I know you probably have a view on this. So I appreciate the way you were careful to make sure everybody spoke. And to, not shut down, but kind of move on from people who talk too much.
But the structure helps to make it easier, which is why I like the circle, because it's like someone else has a turn. Someone has to stop speaking for the next person to speak.
Yes. Right. I'd forgotten it was a formal circle.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem formal because it all just seemed to be pretty organic.
Part of that was because I was using it organically. Sometimes if they're just trying it out, it feels stilted because people like the back and forth. It's a hospitality almost of invitational. Let's hear from every person. And I think it was kind of a stealth usage of it. Let's just try this process. And oh, by the way, it's sociocracy. And actually, Zoom gave me more of a reason to do the circle, because in the room, you can kind of track people's affect as a facilitator. And that was really hard to do on Zoom. So and I wondered if you remember how the disagreements felt handled.
I didn't really feel they were disagreements. They were just different perspectives on the wording, and we worked it through. Someone said some words and someone said, well, maybe this would be better. And then it's kind of like the hitchhiking. Neither one of them's as good as the third one that comes up because you've done the others.
Yes, that's exactly it. That you don't want to be too attached to one thing, because if you synthesize them, you can often come up with a better thing. So that's true.
But as I recall, we never had to start with a blank sheet of paper. That you came in with some suggestions, And I mean, it's much easier to be a critic than write it in the first place.
That's true. That's true. That's a great point.
And you made it very welcoming to offer suggestions.
Yeah, that was part of the strategy. So,
Yeah.
well, that kind of brings me to our my last question, which is about just in general, like what was the participation like in those groups? What did you like about it? Was there anything that was uncomfortable about it?
No, I liked it. I liked it very much because you were organized. I've long decided I'm not going to serve on committees that the leader isn't organized and welcoming, and you just know there's some committees you don't want to be there because there's going to be no agenda. It's going to be all over the lot, and it's just frustrating. So this
Yeah.
was quite the opposite.
Good, thank you. I know one of the committees I inherited from someone else, and the domain, it tried to do too much in its first
Yeah.
iteration. And so pulling it back into what are we really trying to do? It was a big learning curve for me, but I think that was a piece is that we want to make sure we're really clear about what we're deciding and not go beyond that because it gets too
Yeah.
big.
Yes.
Well, Jane, I am so grateful for your time. Great. It was fun watching those again. I got to edit them, so I did a deep dive into the content. What really struck me from those videos is just a second, I lost my notes page. Is we didn't do these recordings today or this week. These were done weeks ago, and especially Teal and the Jesus people talking about how the structures that we're asked to lead in put us into a position where we don't feel good about how we do stuff, and or how we have to show up as leaders in these problematic systems because they're structurally problematic. And I think if we're in nonprofits, non-government organizations, nonprofits, we're doing so because we're trying to change something to make the world a better place. And so, the form of what we do is as important as the work that we do in a lot of ways. And so we had a kind of a general question for you to talk about with one another is what part do you want to connect to in those relationships and how you do the work in nonprofits? Kind of think about what your pain points are. Again, Teal did a really great job of that. Actually, all of our interviewees did. It's like, there's these difficulties, and then the structure, the structure helps to deal with it. But so we're going to have you go in breakout rooms, and we'd like you to just to clarify, we want you to connect with kind of the core piece of how you want to be together in your nonprofit or your non-government organization. And also, we'd like to hear about your pain points. And then we're going to have you come back to this room, the big room, and then share like a pain point from your dyad, and we'll choose one of those to explore with the large group. All right, welcome back, everyone. So you had an assignment to come back with a pain point to share. What I want to do is do a round of just hearing a pain point, and we're going to use these pain points as kind of a picture form of just sort of some of the things we in our organizations that we struggle with. And then we're going to do another round on how the systems or the structures of sociocracy can help to counteract those pain points with life-giving and joy-filled kinds of practices. So let's start with room one, which was Erin and Jan. Do you have a pain point to share?
Do you want to start?
Jan, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I do have a pain point to share. Yes, I have a pain point to share. Well, if we're talking about the essence of what I want to connect in an NGO that I'm working, the main pain point is that there are different essences for different people. within this organization. So they are also coming to different conclusions on what to do and what to act on because the motivation is different.
Great, thank you. How about room 3 with Larry, Lorena, and Michael?
Go ahead, folks.
All right, I can jump in.
Lorena.
Oh, Larry.
So yeah, I think some of the things we talked about were our different organizations, and then I think we kind of circled around some of the pain points of maybe currently being in spaces where some people talk all the time, or like there's like, an imbalance of decision making, and so sort of seeing sociocracy as something that might hold or like kind of govern that space to allow everyone to talk. And then we also discussed like the idea of like the difficulty getting buy-in for sociocracy, like a full adoption or a full training, but maybe being able to work in a few things. And someone used the term like sociocracy light.
Great, thank you. And room 4 with Janie, Tom, and Uli.
We each had our own. How many would you like? One?
Preferably one. We'll be okay with a couple.
Why don't you guys go for it, Janie, Tom?
Well, one of the things I took out of it was that actually getting people to follow any sort of process and stick to it and be disciplined is quite difficult. It requires a lot of investment and trust in the system, and we often don't follow the processes we've got already, never mind learning a new one with sociocracy. So that was one, and how we perhaps easily replicate our existing social habits and power relations and behaviors in an organization and then just make reference to the structural things. So there's something about that, about process and sticking to processes and learning.
Great, thank you. Anyone else in the group want to share?
I'll throw in one then, Janie, if you don't. We are using or starting to use sociocracy in the nonprofit that I work in, and it is challenging for people to recognize the value of actually putting time towards governance rather than just, you're constantly trying to catch up with what there is to do. And we're very small, 8 people or 9, and then just to like stop and really think and create a logbook and make sure we capture our decisions even, those kind of things, they kind of tend to fall by the wayside quite a bit. Seems like overburdened bureaucracy over the small, structure and also work we have to do day to day.
Thank you.
I might just throw one more in there, which is a lot of confusion and angst about how the organizational founder is involved in the governance and overall operations.
Founder, what's the word for that?
They call it
syndrome?
founder syndrome,
Yeah.
but I feel like this is on steroids.
Yeah, that's definitely something that organizations who have a founder have experienced. It's even if the founder wants to back away, it's a little bit hard. Great. So these are all some of the pain points. So I'd like to do another round, and let's see how we're doing time-wise. And we can have everyone participate. I'll just call on people for this one. But looking at these pain points and kind of hearing the stories in our videos from these people who've done an implementation and how it's helped them, what's maybe one thing in sociocracy that you feel could help to be an antidote to some of these pain points, if that makes sense? And I want to just give you a minute to think about that. So what structures or processes in sociocracy could be an antidote to these pain points? Great. Or putting them in the chat is good too. But so I'm going to go with the order on my screen. So Erin first and then Uli.
I feel like I'm not skilled enough to answer that question at the moment, but I think this question that Uli brought up actually of like convincing people to take the time to do this stuff, it feels like, and I don't know enough yet, and I'm not a skilled enough sociocracy practitioner to know, but like, how do you make that joyful? Like, how do you make the governance feel not heavy and bureaucratic and more light and joyful is something that I was talking about with Jan in my group.
Great, thank you. Uli and then Michael.
Sorry. I'm kind of captured with Erin's point because that is in a tiny way my own situation being a founder and wanting to not be that anymore. So I feel like one big thing that's helped is being part of the circles and actively basically not being the first to speak, actively basically making sure that everyone says what they think we should do before I do something, and it's challenging, very challenging. And also really, for instance, in the reviews that we do, being very frank about what goes on for me and how I see the situation, being very open to feedback. And then over time, I feel like we've built really trust and actually like elation about working together. It's really beautiful. So those things have been super helpful.
I'm framing that as humility among leaders. I think there's a humility there that you're modeling that sounds like it can make space for the kind of organization you want to create.
Right, and really letting people trust that you mean it, because it's easy to say, oh yeah, we're going to be like such and such a thing. And even if you mean it, then it just takes time. We're so deeply in these hierarchical ways of thinking, it just takes time for people to go, oh, this is for real,
Great, thank you. So Michael and then Lorena.
Yeah, I think in some ways, like all the sociocracy tools can help with this. But so I think one specific one that I learned recently that's maybe like more of a technique is the idea of like putting some of these cultural or structural issues like as agenda items. So it's like, hey, like let's talk about this thing that's going on, or like here's this tension that's happening. Like, yeah, like formally adding that to the agenda is something I'd like to try more.
Great, thank you. Lorena, I see you put something in the chat, but do you want to talk about it as well?
Yes, about that. Yes, practice with a lot of patience for each member of the group, because everybody or each of us has our own rhythm, and perhaps there is some people is shy or it's don't have the way to share not only words but feelings, no, because the life is that.
Yeah.
And I think that with patience for each member of the group, we can generate that groupal rhythm.
So show a little vulnerability so you're building relationship in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Larry and then Jan.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to use some sociocratic principles as we build our membership organization here in town. And I have not had a lot of practical experience with sociocracy, but I certainly understand it theoretically, and I've also been involved with a salon where we used a talking stick, so that only the person holding the stick could speak. And so, on a personal level, I tend to be the type of person that sees connections and is able to summarize, disparate talking points and stuff like that. So I'm usually ahead of the group, and I need to just pull back and create a space to let it unfold so everybody catches up to where I am, rather than me trying to impose something on the others when they haven't gotten there yet.
Great. So needing to let things just unfold without letting the pace be the pace. Great. Thank you.
Or setting the pace.
Or setting the pace, right?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Jan and then Tom.
I'm thinking about, well, making a decision within a group is actually really, really hard. And being able to facilitate this process with the ideas and principles of sociocracy, that is for me really at the key of a lot of solutions that sociocracy enables, being able to guide a group of people to do that and give them a chance to do it in this way and not just pass it on to the leader. That's really what I love the most and where I see the biggest advantage.
Great. Thank you. Tom, and then finally, Janie.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I guess I in the video when the guy was talking about the Christian community, there was something about he talked about validation and that feeling kind of recognized for what you can contribute and everyone having space to be validated in their contribution. And he talked with real joy. I had a big grin on my face when he was speaking about the group just worked. They found it. They asked the right questions. So that made me feel really enthusiastic. I'm not using sociocracy at the moment, but yeah, I thought that was a good thing.
Great, thank you. And Janie.
Thank you. I'm very new to sociocracy. We're just starting to explore it with my organization, but I think for me it's helping to identify that where people's strengths are, to be able to have them engaged in particular processes and feel really confident and competent to make some decisions and to contribute meaningfully.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just typing that up. All right, well, we're at time. Leonie, would you like to wrap us up?
Thank you, Renee. And thank you, everybody, for joining and for just participating and sharing your stories. As was mentioned, this is the beginning of a series that we will be offering through the NGO Circle of SOFRA. And so for those of you who have joined today, we'll send you some future information about what's coming up. It's our desire to support you through your learning journey for sociocracy, to find out if it's something that you are wanting for yourself and for your groups, and also to help to steward that learning. And so we would also invite your feedback for this session. We'll send this to you post, but I'm also going to put it in the chat as a link to a feedback form. And so we invite you to share, to give us feedback, which is such an important part of sociocracy, so that we can create content that works for you. So with that being said, I want to thank you, Renee and Joe. Thank you, Anne, for the support, and to Mary as well. And I invite us to all unmute ourselves and to say goodbye to each other. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.